filling in as the vice chair tonight since Edward's sick. So tonight, quick review of the agenda. We'll have public comments and commissioner comments. We'll review and approve the main meeting minutes. Then we'll have the election of chair and vice chair for next year, starting in July. And then we'll take a look at the police commission work plan and annual report. That will be given out probably sometime in July to the council when we get a date for that. Then we'll have the chief's report, and then we'll do another review of the code of conduct policy tonight. So with that, I will turn it over to Bob for public comments.
Okay, so far we have two speakers tonight. In order of receiving them, first one is Jesse Larkey, former commissioner, who is back to visit us.
Hi there, thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Jesse Larkey, I live on Camp Creek Road out of Springfield. I'm here on behalf of the family of Theodore Kuderna. He is the 18-year-old missing boy. It's been in the news recently that may have fallen in the river, may just be missing around town. His family is appreciative of what Eugene Police Department's doing to help out. What they would like is to have a little more communication. And I think that this could go to missing persons in general. Being part of it, being with his family each night for the last few nights, it's really hard not knowing what's going on. And one thing his mother's expressed a couple of times is she would just like to know, even if she just heard briefly, what the police plan on doing or what the search and rescue team plans on doing, if they're able to do something that day or not. Just some more information to know what's going on so they can kind of plan. Just wanted to bring that up. They hoped that they could get a point person to be able to talk to maybe once a day, ideally. And they're at a position where they don't know, are they looking for somebody who's underwater, or hopefully that's not the case and he's wandering around town. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, sir. Okay, we've had a couple of new people come in, so I'll reiterate, if you're interested in making public comments, please fill out a blue slip over there on the table. Thank you. Next is Joe Tyndall.
Okay, so my name is Joe Tyndall. I live off of River Road. Now that you've had time to digest the retreat conversation, we will see if after years of ideologically enforced irrelevance, you choose to make yourself worthy of the expense of this monthly meeting. Chief Kern stated that his two main concerns were homelessness and the growing likelihood of violent protests. Will you address these issues? The city appears poised to spend $1 million on homelessness. Homelessness is the problem that will not go away no matter how hard Bob has worked to sabotage efforts to discuss it. Hopefully sanity will prevail on this round. The Opportunity Village website states that $212,000 was raised in addition to free land from the city to provide $1 a day place to live for 30 people. That's $7,067 per bed. $1 million spent at this rate takes a measly 142 people off the streets. Many nonprofits are salivating to waste this money. I say waste because there was an alternative to the Opportunity Village model that would have pulled more folks off the streets at lower costs. The method used to silence this idea was a prolonged ad hominem attack on the person advocating the alternative. If you can't defeat the idea, trash the person. Bob's twist on this was to demand a public shaming in the name of political correctness. You go, Bob. My advice, study and weigh in on homelessness. But if you can't manage that, the U of O, with support from much of Eugene, is poised to go violent, as we have seen at Mizzou, DePaul, McMaster, Yale, Berkeley, Evergreen, and elsewhere. I am rooting for Washington to defund Evergreen and expel the students who kidnapped its president. If you are clueless about postmodernism, third-wave intersectional feminists, social justice warriors, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and the like, it is time you woke up. The day the U of O says no to the cry bullies terrorizing the campus, violence will result. But most likely you will continue making minor edits before rubber stamping policies, and you will fail to fulfill your role advising the chief and the council. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our public speaking. I turn the meeting back over to our chairman.
Thank you, Bob. And so we'll go to commissioners' comments, and Will, if you don't mind me starting with you tonight.
No comment.
No comment. Marty?
A citizen approached me. I don't remember who, sadly, or I'd give you their name. But it was somebody involved in human services. They were concerned about accessibility of these meetings, and having them here being less welcoming to people who have had bad experiences with the police here or elsewhere in the past. And so I would suggest that perhaps in the future we might try a meeting at the Bascom-Tykeson room, and see if that improves access for anybody. I'd like to thank Carter for helping us with the program on opiate abuse that we're going to do at City Club, probably co-sponsored by the Medical Society. And thanks for Chief for the articles on that issue. I think we're going to have that program on July 7th and hopefully have a sort of medical to law enforcement approach on that. I guess maybe for the Chief's comments at the end, if there is a protocol for, I think parents especially, but families of missing people, I know sometimes the elderly as well, it would be good to have sort of a, hey, this is what you can do, this is what we will do, and if there's a family liaison program, I think that's always a good idea. It cuts down, it provides good information to the families primarily. It also cuts down on the, frantic phone calls that the police end up dealing with if they have an avenue of communication. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry?
I'll pass.
I apologize for not being here last month. I'd like to have voted on that setting the priority regarding the work plan. I did attend a civilian review board meeting, and we addressed service complaints, and there really was not much to carry forward from that meeting last month. That's all I have. Thanks.
Okay.
Pass.
Yeah, I attended the meeting they had at the atrium 3 weeks back after our last meeting on the downtown public safety coordination between the downtown team that's working together. The multidisciplinary approach seems to be very interesting. I like the displays that they had there. It really looks like everybody's trying to work hard together to make downtown more viable and a good place to go visit and a safe place to be. So I'm real pleased with that. I'd like to commend anybody who was involved in that effort because it really looks nice. And I'm hoping to see it this summer. Thank you.
I just want to talk just about a couple things. I want to thank all of our speakers today for coming out. I always appreciate the public comments. I attended the police award ceremony last month, and that was very enjoyable. It's great to hear all the really good things that the police officers are doing out there, and some of the ones that put their lives out there a little bit further than most of us would ever do. So it's a really great night. Again, recommend everybody to attend that every year in May. And then I also just want to make comment of some of the articles that the chief sent out. There was one from Salt Lake City about de-escalation where it was, which I thought was really good. And I think what I took from that is as the chief was talking about, the chief of Salt Lake, was that they do a lot of training. And I think the one thing that we really, if we want a police force that is using those types of techniques, we have to give them a budget that allows them to have that sort of training ongoing and making them on and putting more police on the street so they can take the time to de-escalate situations. That's what sort of stuck to me a lot because that's what he said. They've been doing a lot of training, and I just don't think we are given the budget to do these things. So that's it. And then the one comment about having this at the library or something, that there is some problems with the library closes early, and so that would be something we'd have to consider and look at. But it is something I do appreciate you bringing that up because we do talk about that a lot, about is this the best place to hold the meeting? We can always have that discussion again to do that. So, good. Okay, so let's move on, and we'll move on to the review and approval of minutes. Anybody have any comments on the meeting minutes?
They be approved without objection.
I have a first, I have a second. Second from Scott. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Except for both sets. We've got 2 sets of minutes, I think. Maybe.
I'll move to approve the May 11th minutes then. If you want to do the second one.
I'll say.
Oh, yeah, there's both.
Okay, I have a first and second. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Perfect. Okay. Moving right along. So I'm going to turn this over to Bob to do the election of chair for the thing, and Carter will kind of explain the process. She put a memo in here that outlined it, but she can kind of go over it a little bit.
So, the commission elections are governed both by bylaws and by public record law, which basically says everything you do is public, including elections. So I will hand out nomination forms. People can nominate somebody, they have to accept. And they can withdraw if they don't want to accept, but they don't get to say, I withdraw, but nominate so-and-so. If you want to make a separate nomination, you can. And then once nominations are closed, we'll send out around the nomination form. You write down the name of the person and hand it back to me and give me some, unpressured time. It's like a pressure cooker to try to count all 7 votes and not get it wrong. And then I'll announce who the winner is. And likewise with the vice chair position. So both positions are scheduled to be reappointed, reelected every June to begin with a July 1 start date. So at this point, somebody can open for nominations.
Opposite. Running this part.
Okay, I'll handle this part of the meeting for, and open nominations for the chair first. Do I have any nominations for chair? Steve?
I'd nominate Bill. I like the idea of continuity, first year learn, second year master.
Okay, I have a nomination for Bill for chair. Any other nominations?
Well, I guess I'll second it, and then I'll nominate Edward for vice, unless,
Doesn't want.
He doesn't want
require
it.
a second.
Oh.
Nominations don't
Oh,
require a
okay.
second. So any other, I have to close the nominations first, though. So are there any other nominations for chair? Are there any other nominations for chair? Are there any other nominations for chair? I declare the nominations for chair closed. We have open nominations for vice chair. We have Steve.
I would nominate Scott. No, we can't.
Edward, I'm sorry?
Scott, no, we can't.
Oh, Scott, okay. Any other nominations? Any other nominations?
I would nominate Marshall.
Marshall, okay.
I will thank you, decline this time.
You are declining? Okay. Marshall is declining. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Any other nominations for vice chair? Any other nominations for vice chair? I declare the nominations closed for vice chair. We have 2 candidates. We have Bill for chairman and Scott for vice chair. I accept a motion to declare by acclamation without having to vote.
So moved.
Moved by Marshall, second.
Second.
All those in favor of the vote, did you catch enough of me? Okay, all
Who
right.
made the motion?
That was
And then
Marshall.
you
and then-
seconded?
And then Steve seconded. Okay, we have all those in favor of accepting both candidates by acclamation, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Motion's carried.
Do you have-
Election.
I said aye. I just said quiet.
Did anyone abstain?
No. Let's see.
Thank you.
Was it the part that you practiced all your counting to
Is the meeting back open?
Got flustered, you know?
Thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Volunteer.
So let's go over, so we move on to the Police Commission Work Plan and Annual Report. So Carter put in your package our retreat priorities and possible meeting discussions for next year's work plan. And so we have listed them in the order that they were voted on, the high, medium, and low priorities in each of the categories on this form. So as you can see, and that is just really to help the chair people look at doing the work plan for next year, trying to schedule those, if possible, sooner in the work plan for our monthly meetings to do that. So anybody have any questions or comments or anything on that sheet? There we go. Sorry, I was on the wrong page. So, why don't you explain that?
Okay, so, it's a little confusing, I apologize. There, in the beginning of the packet are the minutes from the May 6th retreat, which included a working copy of what you all were working on, priorities. A cleaned up version is included in the work plan and report to the council, which is later on in the packet and begins, it's numbered page, not numbered, but about 5 pages in, and starts with the City of Eugene Police Commission FY 16-17 work plan review. And if you go to that numbered section, number 8 is where it talks about fiscal 18-19 commission priorities. These are not in priority order, they're just in the order that aligns with the council adopted goals for the commission. So there are 5 goals for the commission, and we tried to incorporate the comments that came from the May 6th retreat into those different goals. And at the last commission meeting, there was a motion made to not be hamstrung, I don't think the word was hamstrung, but to not be prescribed by the order of the priority setting. So what you've got here is a not prioritized list of everything that was identified at that May 6th retreat. So at this point, all of this information, a recap of what you did in fiscal 16 and 17, as well as what you intend to do in 18 and 19, is all wrapped up in one report that is here for your review. Assuming it's okay, then when we get a date from the city council, this is what will be presented to the city council for the annual report to the city council. So it's a look back of what you did and a look ahead at what you plan to do. Hope that was helpful.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
Well, just for my own clarity, are you saying the FY 2018 and 19 work plan?
Yes.
It's at the beginning of this, right? It's, yeah, it's like the 3rd page in.
Yes.
Okay. And those they're just divided by the categories, not necessarily ranked in priority.
Correct.
But we intend to get to these in our work plan.
Correct. They're all identified as things to do in the next 2 years.
Okay, and then the vote last month was to have the chair and the vice chair prioritize. Okay, I got it, thanks.
Yep.
Just I'm interested to know what sort of response we might expect to get from the city council. Would they make additional suggestions, or don't do that, or?
I'll let Bob answer that because he's the one who presented the last report.
Yeah.
to the council.
Well, I've been the last couple of times, once with Pamela and then once afterwards when we presented what we had done and then again what we planned to do. And in both cases, they questioned, different counselors had questions about certain aspects of what we did and we, elaborated. And there were also questions about what we were planning on doing, and they had some input on what they thought we should be looking at in these particular cases, and it was helpful to us, so we brought it back to the commission with their concerns. Up until that point, we had council representatives in our meetings, so it wasn't becoming, a little bit easier to have them have their input, but I'm not sure what future will hold, but at least at this point, that's how we handle it, and I think their expectation is that we are following what the charter said we should be doing, and so far I haven't heard anything anymore, so I hope that answers your
Thank
question.
you. Yeah,
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any other comments or questions on it? Okay. Do we need a motion to accept this?
Sure.
Okay. Can I get a motion to accept the work plan review and report so that we can take it to the council when they're ready for us?
So moved.
Second. Second by Will. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Perfect. Moving along tonight. So we'll move to the chief's report.
And you gotta turn that on.
Needs to be turned on.
Then you're good.
Okay, so you've all had you've received slides in your packet last week, so I won't bore you with all the details. These are the things that I was involved in that weren't regular day-to-day items this last year, or month. Some newsworthy items. I'm happy to answer questions about any of these if you like. And these are some things that we have that are in process. The police captain recruitment process, we have an internal committee that's screening the applications, and there's a number of people will be invited to telephone interviews. Those are scheduled for July, and then the final interviews, if we have anybody who goes on, the final interviews will be in August. And the police chief recruitment process is being managed by Christy Hammett, who's the Central Services Director. I don't know if you know Christy. The Central Services also has the city's budget process and manages the city's funds and IT, Information Services Department, and HR and facilities. It's a huge department, and Christy's just an extraordinarily reliable person and good for this kind of job. And the process will involve community outreach for a number of months, and then based on that and the values of the community and the executive team, the city manager, and the council are looking for in the chief, there will be a posting in the fall, and hopefully someone will be hired in the spring of next year. So that's what that looks like. Yes?
I just have a question about the captain recruitment process. I'm in the private sector, so I don't know what's customary, so that's why I asked this question from ignorance, but I'm thinking of like a CEO that selects their executive team, and I wonder if that person, that's hired might be vulnerable in some way if when a new chief comes in and says, I want to go a different direction. How does that work when a new chief comes in and their staff, if their executive staff, if you will?
Yeah, and we had quite a bit of discussion about that. We could have left the position vacant and had AI and acting incapacity in there. That's one possibility. We're pretty short-staffed in the department right now. We have quite a few vacancies, and just when we get close to filling all of our sworn vacancies, people retire, and so we're close to zero in our sworn vacancies, which includes all ranks right now. I think we're at about 1 or 2 once we finish this hiring process. But then there could be 13 retirements before the end of the calendar year. I hope there won't be that many, but there could be as many as 13. So every time we have an acting captain, that means there's an acting lieutenant and an acting sergeant and one less police officer out there. So we weighed that, and then there's also, at the time that we made the decision to move forward with recruitment, we're aware that these processes can take a year or more. And the last time we hired a chief from outside the department, which is a real possibility this time, it took 2 years. So I don't think we want to have a vacancy that could potentially exist there for 2 years. So I discussed it with the city manager and members of the exec team, and it seemed like the wisest thing to go ahead and fill the position. A captain is not an at-will employee. They have a right to the job. They can only be removed from the position where there is just cause to do so. So they're pretty secure. In the history of the Eugene Police Department, I don't know of a time when a chief was hired and then said, we're going to go in another direction. You're all going to be lieutenants now, and we're going to promote different people to captain. So they'll be pretty secure in their position. So that's what the captain and the police chief recruitment look like. This last item is really part of our strategic planning process. So that's another thing. I've been here through a number of interim chiefs periods, and things can feel pretty unstable at that time. At the time that it took 2 years to hire a chief, it became less stable with every passing day. And what happened was that we expected a new chief shortly, and then we discovered that no, that isn't going to happen. It's going to take longer. And so we threw all the gears into neutral, and so things were not moving forward. What I learned from this is that when we have an interim leader, you got to keep everything moving forward. So that's why we're doing this promotion. That's why we're continuing with the work on our strategic plan. So the new chief will arrive here with a strategic plan that they could adopt. They could do it over, they do whatever they want, but it is a communication from the department, not from me, but from our staff, that these are the priorities that we think the department should be working on. Ideally, the new chief would arrive, the department would be cruising along, they could go around, understand how the department works, and then start to make their own adjustments where they feel necessary. So a strategic plan could be like that. A strategic plan includes the lessons that we're going to take from the PERF report, which we hope to see in the next month or two. And then right now we're doing an internal inquiry where this contractor known as Redshift is going through the city's departments. They've worked with Public Works. They just wrapped up with the fire department, and now they're going to be with the police department. It's a series of interviews that they have with the people who work here, and then confidential interviews, and then a group workshop, and then out of that they have some recommendations for the strategic planner for the department moving forward. So that work together with PERF should inform a lot of what we're going to do with our strategic plan. I'm sure it'll be around internal processes, largely promotions, opportunities on special teams. There are personnel evaluations will be reassessed. All kinds of things like that. Career opportunities, mostly what we hope to do with this, and find better ways of running the organization. So it's really quite a gift to hand the new leader all this work that the department has already done. So that's all happening. And then the new policies. Yeah, the new policies were finalized this last month.
Chief, can I ask a question before you move on?
Yeah, you bet.
For the recruitment process for the chief,
Yes.
is one of the paramount characteristics they're looking for is philosophically to be in line with the de-escalation
Mhm.
idea, and so that is paramount in their search, is to get someone who's philosophically aligned with what we've been talking about.
Yes, I'm pretty confident that that's what the city manager expects to see. He's been impressed by the 21st Century Policing Report, so I think he's going to be looking for a police chief that's somebody who's adopted those philosophies and found ways to implement them wherever it is they're coming from. But the community is going to first tell us what the community wants to see in this. The police commission will have an opportunity to provide its input. There's no question about that, CRB, HRC, so those opportunities will be created. I'm not here to tell you what the schedule is on that, I'm just here to assure you that there will be more than enough opportunity for you to tell the city manager what you think is important.
Thank you.
And that's where you would share those kinds of things.
Thank you.
It'll be a comprehensive community engagement process. So the body-worn camera program is rolling out right now. Big part of that was to issue smartphones to all the officers, so that happened over the last 2 weeks, this month. And then they're programming the phones in service. The younger officers are doing it quickly, the older officers take a long time. And then they're also issuing the body-worn cameras, and they're pretty rugged. I'm very impressed with the quality of the product. So that training happened today and yesterday, 2 more days this month. They're wearing the cameras during training. The training this month includes the body-worn video training, the active shooter, and there's one other thing. What is it? What's the other item this month? You know, Kyle? Anyway, and another deal. So they're wearing the cameras during the active shooter training, so everybody can see how they turn on and off. It'll become second nature. And if you'd like, we could have a presentation here later this year. Anytime you like it, we could have a brief presentation. Yeah.
Questions on, what are you doing about storage? Is it cloud storage, or are you having the mainframe? How is this being?
Yeah, we're using software called Evidence on Queue. We're paying a subscriber fee for storage.
Okay.
Done the calculations. We have a pretty good idea of how much it's going to take. We've got within the policy that you can look at. I'm sure it'll be online soon if it isn't already. You can see that there's a retention period for different categories of files. The briefest retention period is 190 days, which is a little more than 180 days, which is how much time someone has to file a complaint in a civil case. And other things expire after 6 months too. So, and then the longest is essentially eternity for
Right. Forever on something. So the other thing is are they going to be issued to all uniformed officers?
Yes.
How about plainclothes officers? Will they have the option of having one, or are they not?
I understand a couple of detectives are going to be wearing them, wanting to have them issued, but they will be available to everyone. Everyone's required to use them if they're working in patrol. So if I do traffic control and work at a U of O football game, I'd be required to wear one.
Okay. And lastly, the animal control people, are they included in? No, not yet?
Have to look at Kyle.
Yeah, they are.
They are. Thank you. That answers my questions. Thank you.
Looks like a good program. It's being implemented very, very well. So,
Do they stay on all the time, or are they turned off and on as they go in and out of calls?
turn them on and off. Yeah, we should go over the policy sometime, so you can see when it's required, but it's virtually every call and every investigative encounter.
And it is uploaded into the public police officer.
Oh, it is, the
manual.
policy
Yeah.
is, so you can look at it.
Yeah, it went live yesterday morning.
Good, all right, thanks. Okay, and then professional stops data collection, we have the remaining 6 months in the pilot. Lieutenant Tinseth has asked for volunteers. He was hoping to get 10 or so, I don't know where we stand on that. The module's ready to go. I think they still have something to work out with SunGuard so that it will only appear for the officers involved in the pilot project. If they can't make that change soon, I'm just going to ask them to move forward with the pilot project anyway. And what that would mean is that it would turn on for every officer, and they just have to, at the beginning of the shift, X out of that module so that it doesn't pop up every time. I understand that it's that simple, but we need to get that moving forward. We've been waiting long enough for it. And then when Perf was here, they said that we do a lot of things well, and perhaps one of the most impressive is our recruitment and retention of police officers. Our retention numbers are good, except for retirements. But recruitment is good. So we have a process that I think closes in July, and then we would hire new officers in January from that process. Let's see here. And we'll be providing you with the updated report tomorrow. I think that'll go out tomorrow. So it's still expect stops data.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. And then Carter and I met with community members in the city's equity office about the hate and bias, annual hate and bias report that will be coming out. That report's on bias crimes that the police department has done intake on, and then bias incidents that are not criminal, which have come in through the police department and through other sources, but which include the Equity and Human Rights Office. So with this group, I wanted to have a conversation with us about how we roll that out publicly, so we talked a little bit about that. Some want to see a separate report on incidents of suspected police bias. So we can work with them and the auditor's office to see what could be created for that. When the stops data gets going, and we will have something more meaningful, I think. Okay, and then the data-led policing report. These are going to be uneventful for you for the most part because the dots don't change that much. But the concentrations are in the same area, Westview, downtown. The concentration for the demand in our service, same areas, Westview, downtown, and Whitaker. Officer-initiated activity is pretty much in the same area, so there isn't enough of it, but that we can afford to engage in happens in the right place. Calls for service, let's see if I can make this thing light up. Oh yeah, that's great. So you can see the calls for service are basically the same. There isn't much growth, and that's public-initiated calls for service and officer-initiated work. So what this line tells me is that there's a certain limited capacity for work. That's why that line would stay flat. So as there's more public-initiated calls for service, there's less time for officer-initiated work. So that's why that line's flat. What you see on the right here is that public-initiated work has gone up 27%, and the officer-initiated work has gone down 34%. Last month, these numbers were almost exactly the same. So the way that we do work, the more technology that we dial in, like body-worn video, the more time it's going to take to do our work. So our ability to do work, our capacity to do work will go down as we add in more things like that. They improve, our reporting and visibility and all that, but that takes time. The response time to calls for service, the gross numbers are that it takes more and more time for us to get there, and I think that's a consequence of what we learned from the previous slide. Priority 1 and 2 calls, which are the highest emergencies, threats to life, crimes in progress, have steadily gone up over the last 3 years. And then for 3 through 5, which are some crimes, low-grade crimes in progress, and lower priority or cold calls, have also at that time has steadily gone up as well. So we have more and more work to do, and these show that there's only so much capacity.
Do you record data at all on the non-emergency numbers? The calls?
Yeah, those fall. So
Those fall.
yeah. So these are not only 911
They're not,
calls,
okay.
they're 911 and non-emergency calls. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. If there's anything about this that doesn't make sense, please stop. So these calls all come into 911 and non-emergency lines, and then we classify them after they come in. So burglary is, I don't know what class of call that is. It's a 4, probably a cold burglary. That comes in on the same line that there's kids knocking down my mailbox right now kind of call.
So if you're able to separate 1 and 2 and then 3 through 5, are you able to separate 1 and then 2 and 3 and 4?
Yeah.
You would be able to say how long it took on a 5, for instance?
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's, you know, when you put 3 through 5, 3 is really important, it's in the middle, but 5 might not be so important, so that might also lower your time.
Yes, this is this is a new analysis for us.
Oh, okay.
So we're working it a little bit more to make it clearer and clearer.
Yeah.
This isn't the only group that I show this to, and so hearing questions like that is helpful for me to understand what we can do to make it so that it makes more sense to everybody. Yes.
One more on the non-emergency, non-911. Is there anything that tracks the number of hangups while they're waiting for somebody to come on the line?
I don't know if we track that. I don't know.
We call
someone
that
calls-
abandoned rate.
Abandoned rate, yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. I'll find out. Is that a trade term, abandon rate?
It is in call center trades.
It is. It's a key metric.
I'll make this note, abandon rate, and then tomorrow I'll look at it and go, what in the world?
What's that?
is that?
Hang-ups.
Yeah, okay, I'll add that to my notes. That's a good question. I'm sure we get those. Okay, and then this is calls for service by volume by neighborhood. So the highest volume of calls for service is in the active Bethel Citizens neighborhood. And then it goes down from there. Where we see the greatest growth in calls for service is, right now, it's in the downtown neighborhood. Westview and, Whitaker, which is where the line is there, and West University, I think I've got that right, yeah, have also seen the most growth over the last 3 years, and then in this last month, we've seen both those come down. So I'd like to think that we had some influence on that, but I don't know if we can say that our work has caused that to happen. But that's actually a good sign. Though there's been more growth in these 2 neighborhoods, but you can see that the number of calls is so small. Percentage by the total is pretty small, so I'm not too worried about that yet. Hopefully the people in Laurel Hill Valley aren't upset by my having said that. Okay, so. That's okay. Okay, so these are public initiated calls for service. The blue line is public initiated calls for service over 3 years. The red line is the calls that came in from the public that were dispatched to police officers. You see, it's just it follows almost exactly the same trend. So downtown, the public initiated calls for service has increased 26%. For me, the police chief, that's the number I care about. How much does the community feel they need us? And so I want that number to keep coming down. Last month, it was 30-some%. The month before, it was even more than that. So the more police presence there is, the smaller that number tends to be. Sorry. So this highest concentration of calls, that's 10th and Broadway and Olive. Between Broadway and 10th and Olive. Used to be, if we were looking at this a year ago, it would have been the park blocks, which are over here probably.
And so that's because that location has improved park blocks with additional
because
programming.
Yeah, and this is like forward-looking infrared. It's relatively more concentrated at 10th and Olive than it is in the rest of that area. Yes?
And a question, so like the little surge we have in 300 Country Club Road, because a lot of people come into the desk here. We also have the substation there. Is there possible that there's a surge in that block between Broadway and 10th on Olive where the substation is, and maybe an increase in numbers based on people coming in there?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
But we also know that buy-to market is right there, and
Right.
I mean, our experience is that, yeah, that's where we would have put that block too.
Okay.
Just for, Okay, West University here is the other neighborhood that has a lot. This is where Whitebird is, sorry. That's where Whitebird is. We get a lot of calls around Whitebird. This is the University District Hospital. And this is Safeway and Hiram's, where we get a lot of calls for shoplifting and those kinds of things. And that's it. Make sure. All right.
Anybody have any other questions, comments for the chief? Thank you. So we are moving right along tonight. So we'll ask Sergeant Williams to join us to look at
The
the
long
code of
suffering
conduct
Sergeant
again.
Williams. Long suffering Sergeant Williams. I had it wrong. The lady works for Oregon Community Credit Union.
Hello.
But she's great. She ever
So Sergeant, I don't know if you want to go over some of the changes you made, or if you just want to do questions that people have after they've seen your changes out.
I was going to suggest that we start where we left off last time and move forward, so we kind of keep this in a more linear way, and then if the commission wanted to, we could go back again to the beginning for the changes since the last meeting, or just do a general, however the commission wants to move forward from there with questions, or going back through the changes even since the last one for the first half. So I'm open from there.
Your suggestion sounds perfect, so let's do.
Perfect.
Go from where we left off.
Yeah, this is, you gotta see the stack I leave in my office. There's about another stack about like that. All right. So that puts us at 1001.5.12, duty to know and enforce laws. That's where we left off at the last meeting. That was a section where it was a little spread out, and I just I pulled it out a little bit to separate it out a little bit to simplify the reading of it. And one thing that's going to be, I mean, we'll just need to address moving forward. This copy that you have here is, the entire thing's been converted to reflect employees, as you probably noticed, not user officers. It's more general. And the entire thing has been reworked to be in the affirmative, which was a significant undertaking by my volunteer and a significant review by me once she was done with it. And so that's the one that I worked off of because it really did look like the best fit to move forward with. So that'll be a component once we get done. But it also did impact some of the ways that some of the concerns that were brought up became even a little bit more complicated in just how to work that into the new portion of it. So this is one of those sections. So you'll see how it's been rewritten there. There was some concern about 1005.12B. All employees must take appropriate action when required by department policy, practice, or local, state, or federal law. In the times that we're in, there were some concerns about the federal law and what we are and aren't enforcing. It seemed like this was the easiest way to be able to distinguish that that obligation relies on the chief, and so I added that in order to try to ease those concerns about the issues with federal law, basically. So the chief can set the standard for if there are some components that we aren't going to enforce federally, and so, does that make sense?
No, it does. I have a kind of a question, probably more for the chief than for you, Sergeant, but is there any liability, and I'm thinking of in any law in general, that if you decide that that's one that the department isn't going to enforce as a community, is there liability that by not enforcing that the department would ever have? And besides like federal, let's just say it's a state law that maybe our community doesn't like.
Yeah. I don't know, since I don't know of a time when we've had a law that we've chosen to not enforce, but if we decided we wouldn't enforce red light violations, I guess eventually someone who was injured could bring a lawsuit against it. But I don't know, I've never heard of anything like that happening. Usually the direction from the police chief is how we go about our enforcement practices.
Yeah, I was just making sure there wasn't a liability by having the chief could actually.
Any thoughts or concerns about that section? Duty to identify as a police officer. This is one again where I kind of peeled it out just to simplify the reading of it. Yeah.
So the former, or the current policy says, I don't think this is the language exactly, but this is what it means. It says, when asked, all sworn police officers must identify themselves. This says every time we're doing our job, we have to we give our name and badge number. I'm pretty sure that would be a change of practice.
Yeah, and that, that message I think is one that got changed with the trying to turn it into the affirmative, because in the previous version of this, it's refusal to identify self, which would indicate when asked.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a good notation to make, and one that I certainly didn't catch when I was reviewing it. That, yeah, the original policy is when asked, and we should work that in there.
Say, as a police officer, when asked, when engaged in a department.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a mind bender on some of these on how to.
I sure appreciate
Yeah,
it.
it's
I like it this one.
I really appreciate Linda Phelps' work. She does very, very, very good work and takes it seriously. Anything else for that section?
Just a thought came up to me. It's just, we've had this discussion before at the commission about training exercises, or between training exercises, there's some where they're not always identified, but they're carrying, and I hate to always use the example, but the SWAT example, the SWAT's coming back from a training, they may not have their shirts on that say police on them. They may either wear camouflage or something else. And I guess, is that somewhere where in here we need to, should that be addressed in this policy somewhere that, that if you're wearing your gun and other things openly, that there should be some identity of, I don't know how to work that in, but I know that was an issue that's come up before the commission and the public about that, so.
We have a policy on uniforms,
Okay.
so we can definitely bring that to you. And I think we discussed it a year ago.
Yeah.
We did.
Won't comment.
Okay. Are you done with?
I was just going to say
that.
that it's probably better to be addressed in the uniform policy,
Okay.
if it isn't already specifically.
Yeah, my comment, I observed some SWAT officers at a ceremony recently, and they were wearing the camouflage, but they had a Eugene police patch on their arms. So I'm wondering if somebody issued an order that they, mark their uniform, even if it's in camouflage, with a patch identifying as police.
I don't know for sure, but my recollection is that SWAT did make some changes to ensure that no matter what they're wearing, that they're more identifiable to avoid that problem. And I'm not really aware of any other units that would potentially have that issue. Most everybody, if they're wearing a gun, are wearing a standard badge. And the practice is, I don't know if it even says it in policy, but the practice is that the badge is as close to the gun as it can be, which is why you'll see most people, detectives sometimes will have them hanging, but most people, if they're wearing like I am, they'll have the badge right down by their gun, so that if you see the gun, you see the badge at the same time.
Thank you.
So that's an intentional move, not to have the badge on the other side.
Okay, thank you.
Unsatisfactory performance, this is the shirking section. So we changed that around. And then as I was reading it today in preparation, I got to thinking that this is probably one where employees should likely say officers, because this really isn't a line that applies to record staff and other people. So we need to, it reminded me that we do need to go back through with a fine comb and make sure that the employee reference is appropriate for each one of the sections as they're written out, because some of these are specific. And that's one of those things that is just a little bit complicated in the conversion to this form of having the POM. So I'll make another note of that to make sure I don't forget. Any thoughts on how we reworked that line? I think it still captures what we were looking for, but got rid of that word that seemed to bring up a lot of discussion on both sides of the table. There was some talk about the word requiring, about what that is. There wasn't any particular motion about it, and because our job is so wide and broad, I left it in. If the commission wanted to make a motion about specifically changing that, or really anything in here, I would encourage the commission to do so. At the same time, that's why I didn't make a change with it. I chewed on it, really thought about it. I wasn't sure what the better alternative would be.
In some ways, I actually like the requirement. It's a situation that requires them to do that.
Yeah.
Because that is sort of, it gives them a little bit of judgment.
Yeah.
That, whether they really, but they know, there's certain things you just know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if they elect not to, then it's on them to make the justification for why they didn't feel like it required their response.
Right.
And then that standard can be decided upon later. And then D is a work in progress. So that was the inefficiency, incompetence, or poor performance of assigned official duties. So I'm trying to make it more subjective and on a little bit of a timeline. That was what I initially worked up, and I'd be open to ideas. All employees must perform the required tasks associated with their official duties, rank, or position as described by the job description or their job description.
I just wonder if that's a better comment than C being in there as well, since you don't have standards for C.
Yeah.
So I like D because it ties it into the job description right away. And I think keeping C is a good idea because it encourages people to be in good condition. May not be a standard that you have to reach like 50 push-ups, but you got people that know that they need to be in good condition, and that everybody knows what that means. Some people don't always follow it, but they know what it means. And so I think it's important to tell the officers to stay in good physical shape and be ready for the situations that they might face. Most of them know it, and I think they take the time to do what they have to do to be in shape. It's good to have that in as affirmative. Need it.
Yeah, that's definitely brought up a lot of discussion, and I
agree
feel
that
like
they should be in physical condition, don't get me wrong, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is the code of conduct, and then it's
And
very
we've tried
subjective
to soften it up. And if there's a way that we can soften it even more to kind of try to find that balance between telling people that you need to be able to do the bare minimum of what your job is, without being at a level where we're trying to impose a standard. I'd be open to suggestions on that as well.
And I think that's where Scott was going with that. Almost de-encompasses that because
Yeah.
the job description in itself says that
Yeah.
you must be able to run and
Do the tasks as it is
right,
with
and do all those things that
Yeah.
without saying, because it does a little bit that, would you ever discipline somebody that is out of shape or you feel is, or how could you even, I mean, even to measure that, because somebody who we might look at and say, well, they're out of shape, but they still were able to run that person down or jump over that fence, I think makes it a little tough to be able to then use that as a way.
I understand, given, the job functions, that having some sort of conditioning would be necessary. So it might be important for you where it might not be for some other types of employment. But I'm almost thinking if you wanted something in there, you could frankly delete the two safe after conditioning, you just stop at conditioning. That might address your concern, because we're not saying like what kind of condition necessarily. And then the safely perform would be, and I'd say probably described within the job description as opposed by the job description, but the rest of it could be in the job description. So if you felt like, that it was important to make that statement for the officers, I'd probably just put a period after conditioning.
Yeah, well, theoretically, we can apply C. And as a supervisor, I've done it once, where it was evident that someone, because of their physical condition, wasn't able to perform their fundamental job duties. So we relied on this to require that they achieve a certain level of fitness. But it was determined by a medical professional, not by a obstacle course time or something like that. It's probably better for us to have it in there. It is an expectation. You got to meet a certain level of physical condition in order to get the job.
And hopefully, at some point, we'll get the testing to back up or some sort of something in place where we have a little more teeth with that.
Measure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you should keep it in there, the second part, because the requirement is, when you get hired, is you have to pass a physical, you have to go to the doctor, and they have to examine you, make sure you can perform certain sudden aerobic activities and not have issues based on that. So, tying it into doing it safely is important, not only for the officers, but for the public as well, because you've got some guy who can't handle himself safely to perform his job, somebody else gets hurt because they get shot instead of being taken physically into custody, then it can have repercussions. I think tying that in, the two together, again, it was excellent that it shows why you need to stay in shape, and I think you got to keep that in somehow. You reword it, that's fine, but keeping something in there to let them know that they have to, why they have to stay in shape in this case. Thank you.
Any other comments on that?
No changes on 1015 or 10515 endorsement of products and services.
Just a reminder, we had a public comment on this, if I remember right, and that there was a concern that there was officers that were afraid to maybe participate in an organization because of this statement. And there was an example given to say that you can participate as an individual, you just can't represent the city or the police department.
Which one are you?
Yeah, so
15?
Yeah.
15.
Are you suggesting adding something that says that you can't participate, or are you
Well, I don't know.
commenting that it?
I don't remember what it originally said. I don't know if this is rewritten from previous statements, but it does say now that use their position or authority to endorse any organization. But I guess it seems to me that's clear that somebody could participate, but it doesn't necessarily, if you read it quickly or you didn't understand, you might feel a little gun shy about joining an organization just as an individual, citizen, community member.
You're saying privately versus?
Right.
So they could join as long as they're not repping the
Exactly.
organization?
Exactly. So there was just that little caveat there that was recommended, but 2 weeks back, or a few months ago.
I'd like to just point out that on page 3, under use of position and authority, you've added a section for self or others. And when you say others, that also comports with this section here, 101.15, which makes it kind of a little bit harder, difficult for an officer to advocate for an organization or a group that's trying to help downtown. I mean, the Springfield Police has that fund from a person that left monies to help, let the police department help. And we have, I think, First Baptist churches have a fund that we use. And if officers wanted to advocate for someone, we just had the story about the vet that used to hang out across the street. And the officer got him a meal, and then he got him, get him some health services and dental services when he needed it. So if you read this literally and use of position or authority as a police officer, you come in uniform in a restaurant and you ask for a meal for this homeless guy, you're using your position for others. And it says not just for you, but for others. And the same thing applies in this section. And my concern is that you wouldn't think anybody would ever use it against an officer to try to help someone else. But it has a chilling effect if they're told they can't do it, period. So the things we're trying to do to help the community out there by getting people to assist those who are in need are going to be contravened by this kind of conduct, this kind of language rather.
Okay, and we're going to have to go to a queue apparently, so Steve, you're next.
Well, I think that there were others, and maybe Sergeant Williams can clarify, others that are like perhaps related to the officer, not in that situation. But I agree with you that that's ambiguous, because literally it says all others when I think it's an extension of self or somebody that, you're related to in some way.
Yeah, that was the intention without being too verbose. But we probably need to dial that in a little bit somehow.
Yeah.
I made a note. I'll ponder that one at my desk. And this is one that got a unique switch around from the previous, which was using position authority with the department to endorse any organization, program, product, or service without authorization from the chief. So that's the positive spin on it. Prior authorization by the chief of police is required before any employee may use their position or authority with the department to endorse any organization, product, program, product, or service.
I just have a question about that that's nagging at me. So, are you in effect using your position or authority if you show up somewhere like to a computer club with your uniform on? I just don't know where a line is or how you would. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, is the mere wearing of the uniform a kind of implicit endorsement or use of authority of some kind? I wouldn't think so, but.
Yeah. No, we could work on it. Sure. We didn't eliminate because we speak at elementary schools and endorsing them. To me, this is intended to be an act, we can't star in commercials that says.
Exactly.
Joe Blow with the Eugene Police Department endorses this padlock.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you could read it either way. I think there is a little bit of ambiguity because endorsing it says use their position or authority with the department to endorse any organization, and I read that as being pretty intentional. That's an intentional act of endorsement, not showing up at a service organization meeting. I went to a few Rotary meetings when I first joined in uniform because I was still working patrol. I'm not endorsing that organization. I'm sitting in the back of the room as a club member. And so I'm not actively endorsing that program. It's not my intent. I'm not up there or out in the public endorsing that program. So I read it as a more intentional act
so do I.
in the way that it's read.
Bob?
So would you have some suggested? I'm coming out of this with my head scratched just a little bit on what the commission would like us to
Well,
do with this. To
the
restart the queue, I'm
Well,
sorry.
maybe-
Go ahead, Bob, and I'll put myself in.
only thing I can suggest is that the second section does provide for an exception for the chief of police. So if, for instance, this officer who found the veteran who was in need were able to contact the chief or his representative while in his absence and say, I have this guy and he needs some help, and is it okay if I use, my authority as a police officer to talk to some people and get him some help? And the chief says, fine. But on the other hand, if that happened a lot, there's going to be a lot of demand. So how about the immediate supervisor? Perhaps
Chief or
somebody-
designee?
Yeah, that somebody would designate as a person who they could clear it through and be able, and somebody to act in his stead when he's not available on vacation or whatever. And the other thing you could do is in the first section is to exempt any efforts to help a charitable organization, or in other words, speak out affirmatively toward officers who want to assist people that need help, and go to Whitebird with someone and say, can you give this guy a bed tonight, or can you help him out? And not penalize them for something that might happen afterwards, and so will you use your authority as a police officer to get him here? Now he raised hell and hit 2 people, and now you're in trouble for that. So I think by placing some exemption in there, by stating this section is not to be taken or be construed as preventing officers from doing charitable, good deeds toward people in need. Maybe something like that. I don't know.
So I feel like we're kind of mixing again, because this is endorsement of an organization, program, product, or service, not soliciting a program, organization, product, or service for a special benefit.
Right.
So I think we're still almost kind of mixing that, wherever it was back there somewhere.
Page 3.
Page 3, yeah. For others, when you have.
Yeah, to obtain personal or financial gain or advantage, and so that certainly could that'll use a little bit of tune-up to carve out those caveats. And I like the idea of adding the chief or designee for the authorization, as long as the chief's okay with that.
Right.
And that would likely fall down to the watch commander for patrol,
Right,
or
right.
that similar level, lieutenant level, I would think, across the organization.
That way it puts a check on the officer, maybe he's stepping too far over the line, or maybe not. You've got another voice in here, somebody in command, and helps him say, yeah, that sounds like a good deal, let's go do it, let's help him out. I think those kinds of things are great for the community and great for the department. It's just one of those things where we should continue to encourage it and not put a roadblock in there for something. Thank you. I'm done.
So I have myself in the queue, and then I have Steve. Well, I think, this is not an issue just with the police department. We have the issue where I work too, that, what do people go out and represent our organization with? And so I think you have to really just more look at what your intent is here, and maybe just make that a little more clear in here. Because I agree, I don't agree that you would want to designate this to a sergeant to make that decision. Because I don't think any of these decisions that you're trying to look at in this section are ones that should be made on the fly. These are ones that need to have a command staff look at and say, do we want that person in uniform saying the Eugene Police Department is behind this? I think that's where, this is what this section is, because that's why I think most employers have to look at that. This is more of you don't want anybody just saying, well, now the police department is endorsing this organization or this product or something like that. So I think you just have to make your intent that this is more of that maybe just a little more clarity in this section. It's a tough one. We deal with it a lot too. What people can do and can't do. As are they representing the bank to do this? Are they not even? So I just think this maybe trying to get in this section here just a little more of what the intent of that, you don't want it to where an organization that would cause, or a product that would cause the police department harm or something like that, is what your intention is. But I do think it should stay at, it's a command and staff level decision. So, Steve?
I agree with both of your comments, and I thought you were talking about section 3 as well, and I agree with that, but I think like one word as you're looking at this could be helpful, and you said it earlier about like intentional or active. So I almost feel like if you put the word active in front of endorse, because then it's the by association you remove, because you're not. You can show up at the computer club, as Will said, you're actively endorsing. Now if you say, look, join the computer club while in uniform, you are. That means something different. So that might be a helpful word.
Got it. I also wonder, as I read it, it's easy for your imagination to wander as you start thinking about all kinds of different circumstances and ways. And if you took a breath, closed your eyes, and then reread it just with the words that are on the page, trying to kind of cut out that stuff, all the what ifs, and just look at it for what the words are. Does it still, do we still, or have we let ourselves go down a road where we brought in too many what ifs and we just complicated what it really is, which
Maybe.
use their position or authority with the department to endorse an organization, program, product, or service. An endorsement is it's pretty clear what an endorsement is or isn't.
You're right.
So I would just food for thought as I sit here and ponder it myself. Okay. Anything else on that one?
It's always easy to overthink it.
I know. Well, that's
It's worthwhile, though.
that's the problem I get into with some of them. And it's good to go down that road, but then it's also good to hit reverse a little bit and kind of back out of it and try to look at it again. So I'll look at all the suggestions and see what I can think of. Illness or injury and sick leave. And I didn't have any changes from that meeting all the way to political activity. So let's take a minute if people want to browse through those sections and.
I have a silly grammar thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Just because it makes it unclear when you say the facts of an illness or injury to the department. To the department should be placed before that, because the injury or illness isn't to the department. So you're misrepresenting to the department the facts of an illness or injury. Because when you say it, because my first read of it
Injury
said the
to the
facts of an
department.
illness or injury to the department, what do we do to the department?
Yeah.
And that was it's just an English thing, really,
I
a grammar
appreciate
thing.
that. And I think that was one of our funny, because it was originally misrepresenting the fact of an illness or injury, so that was one of our funny transitions that, I appreciate you catching that. And I do, I guess, have one note in here to the intoxicants portion. And that's,
Wait, hold on.
Oh.
You have something on a different
Yeah,
section.
on subparagraph C,
of which,
say sick leave.
okay.
It could just read, sick leave must comply with City of Eugene APM, blah, blah, blah. Use of sick leave must comply with. Just to further eliminate the negative framing of all that.
Yeah, and it cuts words, which I always like to.
Not violating, saying, make it better.
Perfect. And I don't see it on my last set of notes, so I'm not sure where I got it from, or if it's maybe an old notate, and that actually could be that if it's from a previous round. 10.1.518E, the question of recently. And you can see my note on why I left it as it was, but open if anybody has a particular feeling. So 10.1.520, political activity, unless there's any comments or suggestions in between there. At some point through the process, and it's hard to know when, because I was given a draft of this when I came into the office. Engaging in political activities during assigned work hours except as expressly authorized by the chief have been crossed out. I spoke with the city attorney about that, and then we reviewed the Oregon elections law stuff. And we're in line with the law with where we're at there.
I'd just like to flag the training issue, that, again, the language can be unintentionally inhibitional, so when people come on, we should say, hey, just so you know, this is what we're talking about, and this is what we're not talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need to change the language of it, just.
Okay. 10.1.521. It was suggested to add the reporting of damaged property. So that was plugged in there. Just a second, I got one more here. I just have to. C, there was also an adjustment where we added for personal gain or any other for personal gain. No, that was in there. Where did the? Hang on, stand by. Again, it's the switch of the affirmative. It was suggested for self or others, and it was generally ambiguous. Was a concern. Employees must use their badge, uniform, identification card, or other department equipment appropriately and not for personal gain or any other improper use.
Looks good.
I don't know that it's any less ambiguous, but I'm not sure what else to do with that one. If there's anybody has any thoughts at this point. And that takes us down to expectations of supervisors.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I like to change in B. I just note that you used the word potential, which is different than the word suspected in 100158G. And I just want to know if that was by design. There's an opportunity, because those are very similar. One's for supervisors and others not, but you used the word suspected in G. And then if you want to use that word, they basically mean the same thing, so I don't really care a lot, but just notice it's different.
Yeah, and I think we talked about that before. That rings a bell now. What was the section title for the previous one? Because we added a section that's screwing up my numbering here.
Hang on, let me go to it on mine. 1015G. 58.
Oh, 58G. I thought you said 55. I'm sorry. So,
58.
no, even
No,
100158 doesn't.
Oh, it's, yeah, it has renumbered. So it's, now it's under 10159, and that looks like, F. Is that
Oh,
right?
failure to report known or reasonably suspected misconduct. Yeah, and that was one that I think you have brought that up before.
Yeah, I'm fine with, you know,
It's not intentional, that it's different. The notes that I had were suspected or potential, and I liked potential better than suspected because it added a little layer of burden of proof. And we could probably go with potential or reasonably suspected on both of those.
yeah.
I
I'm fine
would,
either way. I was just a question if you thought
Yeah.
you used it differently for intentionally.
no, was just going off the notes off of this and didn't have a note on the other one, so I didn't tie it together. Are there any opinions on which of those is better?
I'll put both.
I mean, I sort of like potential
Yeah,
better, just because I think it makes you think a little more about, okay, what, other than, well, if I suspect it, I think it's a little different connotation than if you think, if I do this, could this potentially be, you know, or could that conduct, could that potentially be
Yeah.
a problem, or than.
And
I suspect it would be.
reasonably suspected, like we put in elsewhere, just feels like a brainful. Reasonably suspected, well, it adds more ambiguity. So maybe in that other section, we ought to change that to the reasonably suspected to potential.
It's like consistency.
Yeah. Anybody object to that change or that move?
Okay.
So we could go back to the beginning. I only had one other, and it's a grammatical point, and it's under the conduct 10159. It's under E. I think you should flip the impair significantly, so it should be, or significantly impairs. You started it.
Well, I taught grammar. What can I do?
You
It's just
find it?
in there.
What was the section against?
It's under conduct 10159, and it's E,
Are you no longer doing this? Do you want to come?
and I just flipped.
Read for me.
I would.
Significantly impairs operations. Grammatically, that's better. You're right.
Add verb before the verb.
See? I got a gold star for that.
Yes.
All right,
That's
so
it.
let's finish the supervisor section if we can, and then we'll
that's all right.
bump
I thought
back.
we
I
were
think
done.
we've got plenty of time, so. The only addition is gonna be at the end of that, which we'll talk about when we get back around to the loop. This is the second, or the last page of that is letter E. And there was some concern about having a section on retaliation, which I pulled from Portland Police and added in here. There was a portion of that that talked specifically to supervisors, and so I pulled that out and added into the supervisor section rather than having it included for clarity. So that's where that came from. But I apparently didn't make a bubble comment next to it, so I wanted to point out that that was a change. Any other thoughts or comments on the supervisor section?
That's a long sentence.
Is that one big sentence?
Which one, B?
E.
No, E. That is one sentence, isn't it?
We can talk about it later.
It's a copy paste from Portland.
That easily looks.
I did read it, but apparently not that
No,
closely.
I got it on this one. I don't
Unless
have
you
it on
get
this
the
one.
supervisor.
I brought my
then-
last week's.
The tax code is less complicated.
All
I
right.
can tell you how to shorten a sentence, but it's not a substantive addition.
All right.
All right, so that concludes last month's meeting. Now we'll go to this month's meeting, if everybody's okay with that. So, rolling back around to the front. I don't think anybody at any point in this process has liked that conduct that may result in discipline title, and we had some discussion. I had about 6 different things written in there as I wrote it down and sat back and looked at it and then changed it again. So this is 1001.5. And that's what I changed as standards for conduct, which still I don't like. And I hope you guys would have some way of smoothing that out for me. Standards of conduct, conduct standards. It really doesn't like any of it. Causes for discipline, I didn't like that because that seems too negative as well. Expectations of conduct was a suggestion.
I like that better than standards.
Okay. Almost any of those, I don't know, for some reason, it's the of or the connection of conduct with. So, expectations of conduct, that sounds like, looks like from the nods I'm getting, seems to be the most liked.
Better.
Or even expected conduct.
What about misconduct? One word.
About conduct requirements.
I thought about just conduct, but we have a section titled conduct deeper in it.
Yeah.
And so that seemed
So conduct,
confusing.
conduct.
Yeah, and that section is kind of the mop-up catch-all within the policy.
I see.
Conduct, did you say conduct standards? Do you have, yeah, oh, potato, potato.
Expectations for conduct or expectations of conduct?
Well, did we change the other conduct to the word?
Or expected conduct.
Standard duties and conduct.
Behavioral standards, maybe?
I like conduct.
It's kind of a silly problem, and yet at the
It
same
is.
time, you start thinking about it, it's hard to put a finger on what the right
Would you change it from conduct standards?
conduct that may result in discipline.
I like conduct standards.
Standards is in the previous title.
Yeah.
Professional standards.
And there was a little piece of me that liked that they kind of correlated together, but they had a different,
How about
Different focus.
yeah.
etiquette?
Standards of etiquette.
Department etiquette or required etiquette.
That sounds like table manners to me.
Framework for professionalism, or, I don't know.
It's weird. It's hard to put a thumb on.
Fine.
I'm glad we're having as much struggle as I did. Okay. We'll move forward.
We'll think on that.
Yeah, maybe we can come back to it at the end once we've one last
Yeah.
round of standards. And take just a couple more quick notes here. It probably won't make a bit of difference once we make a decision, and it just won't matter at that point. All right, so the next section where we had discussion was the abuse of position and authority. And it was brought up that it just didn't sound good to have to obtain special privileges without approval from the chief, because there wasn't any real definition of what that special privileges was. It was suggested to put the approval of the chief down at the bottom of that section, but as I got to reading that, I don't know that we want the chief authorizing. Hang on just a second. Okay, yeah, I don't know that we want the chief authorizing people to obtain personal or financial gain.
No.
Or the chief to authorize somebody to avoid consequences of illegal acts. So I tried to just change it to put off to make it more clear that that's an unlikely but potential option in that one specific category. In rare and lawful circumstances, the chief of police or city manager, in the case of the chief, may grant an exception to this provision, which is wordy. Because if the chief is the one that's in that position, who makes the authorization then? So it's a weird one, and I'm open to suggestions.
Well, what could possibly be permitted by the chief of the city manager?
In the case of somebody asking for additional police service that the rest of the public wouldn't get, could be construed as a special privilege. Something that would be denied to other citizens, but a police person is specifically asking for. And that was brought up by the union to me, that adding the without the authority of the chief was suggested by them because of that circumstance.
The protest of the city councilor. Oh, sorry.
Cute, sorry, Marty. Bob?
Yeah, no.
So, yeah, like, I was thinking in situations where officers take a position outside a business where there may be strikers out front, picket lines and that type of thing. We always heard about how that's taking sides, you know, dispute and that kind of thing. Of course, we all know they're there to keep peace, but I just wondered what circumstances or you know, how high of a bar do you set for what requires the chief of police to actually intervene and say, oh, it's okay to do that? I mean, that seems to be a very high bar that you're setting. And if it's that high, then like, I kind of sort of agree with the chief of war. I can't imagine what situations would require it. I mean, these things that people do for somebody else, you know, if they're in uniform and they're trying to keep the peace and they're doing what all this other stuff says they're supposed to be doing by their conduct, then they're not violating anything, really. I mean, it's just, but if they're doing favors for somebody, you know, delivering their pizzas for them as an absurd example, you know, then you're getting way out of the realm. But this just doesn't seem to be a way to make this workable after I've read through it. I don't know how you do that.
So we're just suggesting that we just cut that whole section out?
I think so. It solves the problem. It's certainly covered in every other section, this conduct and the way what you can't do and what you can do, and you know, there's many places in here where you would, you know, use your authority.
Would you just remove the entire B or just the approval portion? Is that what?
Well, I mean, it's okay to keep obtaining special privileges in there because that's addressed in several other places, and that's consistent with everything else in here. You're not using your uniform to get anything,
Yeah.
bribes and solicit bribes or anything. I mean, all that's consistent, but getting into the details of how you go circumvent that and requiring chief of police approval is really, really, and in a situation, you're adding language in here that may never ever be used, and it opens it up to, I mean, if I were the public and looking at this, I'm asking myself, what, like the chief did, what possibly could the chief approve that would be, you know, I'd want to know more. Maybe
Yeah.
they already have, you know, and then you're opening up another whole level of curiosity, and I just think it's unnecessary. I think the first part of that sentence speaks for itself, but whatever you choose, I'm just saying.
I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to make everybody happy, which is not usually very possible.
Go ahead, Chief.
So it doesn't make any difference to me.
You know what the union's concern was? Why they?
Yeah, the example was brought up was the OSP investigation that you asked for, and that with what happened at your home, and that their feeling was that if anybody else had asked for that, we would not have provided an investigation to somebody else. That was given out of the best interest in the public, but that technically that is a special privilege in the best interest of the public. But when you're looking at the letter, what the policy says, that would be in violation of that.
That's
So
one way to look at it. Another, I don't think that's a very rational way of viewing that. It'd be like if a public official had a threat on their life, we would give more, we would provide a higher level of security for that because the risk to the public official is greater than it would be perhaps someone who isn't a public official. It all goes in, that's one of the factors anyway, that should be considered when deciding what level of security to provide for somebody. So it's not their position as a public official that is granting them a benefit that they wouldn't otherwise have. It's their position of a public official that's telling us that they're at greater risk, perhaps, than someone else might be. So, I mean,
I'm not sure how we got to talking particularly about security. I think it was more.
I'm using a different scenario than the one the
Okay.
union is using to illustrate the same point, and that is that sometimes it's someone's position that makes police involvement more necessary. It isn't a privilege that they're being granted. It's a level of service that circumstances require, partly because of their position. Does that make sense? That's
Yeah, I was gonna say, when the governor comes to visit in Eugene and they need police protection, we don't ask, well, wait a minute, are we seeking to gain advantage for another person based on their position? Or, you know, we immediately know that this person represents the government of Oregon, and we're required to give a little extra police protection to that area. So we do. You know, in my opinion, that's why we do it, but I'm just trying to, has anybody even come up with a scenario, you know, the one that you're suggesting maybe the union thought, but I've seen cases where state police have stepped in, investigated something that involved another officer because BPD didn't want to make any criminal investigations, or the district attorney has looked into the charges because they have investigators, because to exempt DPD from having to look like they're showing any favoritism or anything. So, I mean, these things are solvable in other ways without having to add a section in here that seems to me opens more questions up than actually helps.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with that. It became more complicated as I tried to work out the concern that was brought up at the last time. I've got no, whatever the commission would prefer, we can cut that totally out. We could cut it back to without authorization of the chief so that it does focus on those other times where we do want the chief's involvement in doing that filtration to make sure that we're doing it appropriately and at the right times. The problem was that brought up the concern that that depending on how where your creative minds went, that could be looked at in a lot of different ways, and so it doesn't make any difference if the commission wants to come up with a motion on how we want to address that. Or if there's some consensus on just removing the whole thing, adding it back to just without authorization of the chief of police now that we've really worked this thing through, or just deleting the second half and leaving it as just with the special privileges. It makes zero difference to me, and
I guess
it's complicated.
Yeah, and I wasn't here for the first meeting where you may have talked about this more, but I guess when we talk about special privileges, I guess that's where I'm a little fuzzy on, because you know what could be considered a special privilege, and you know that we might grant somebody or a police officer or somebody in that we need to have something. And I don't know an example. I guess kind of on the lines you guys were talking, I think about what happened in LA a few years ago where the ex-officer was starting to go after their supervisors and police officers and was actually killing them. And they stationed SWAT officers and everybody else throughout Southern California at police officers' houses that were on his list. Is that a special privilege?
No.
This, I guess, I mean, I know, but I know those are the kind of things, is that what the public would think is a special privilege? Because that's what sort of this policy a little bit is written towards. And I'm just trying to go down that, do we want something in there that says, yes, the chief could say, yes, that we're going to do that, and you guys may look at that as a special privilege. We may not. And I think maybe that's where the union was going a little bit, was that some things that maybe you would think as a department, well, that's just common sense, but the public might go, you know, that's a special privilege, because we wouldn't get that. And so you might want to, and I'm not saying we have to answer that, but we might want to really think about what could be considered as a special privilege that you might want to say, yes, that could be. I mean, I agree the other ones should not be approved, the other A, C, and D, but there could be something in B that could. I don't know what that is tonight, but I just want to make sure we think through that, because we don't want to have that to where it could be something and then it could say, well, it's right in your code of conduct, says you can't have that special privilege.
Mr. Chair.
Just hold on a minute, Bob. I want to make Kyle, see if he wants to answer what I have to say first.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it can be looked at in a lot of different ways, and depending on what lens you're looking at it through, it can certainly be looked at in different ways.
Okay.
The problem, like so many of the sections that we have here, we could probably write an entire book about what is and isn't considered a special privilege, and so where do we draw that line between letting it lie versus how much do we try to add some level of clarity of what that is. My mind goes to, and it's probably covered in other places, badging a restaurant to get your meal for free, or getting into a concert using your police credentials, or talking to the security guy and weaseling your way into something. I disagreed with the union, which is why I left it simple, just that without authorization of the chief, and that appeased them, and it seemed like kind of a common ground that would hopefully go unnoticed, or be acceptable. I don't know what the right answer is there, because I hate to overwrite and I hate to overthink, but it definitely is something that's multiple people have cued in on as being noteworthy, and so I don't have an answer for you.
No, I thought it was just more of something to
Yeah.
think about a little, make
Yeah.
sure that we have thought through all of that, so.
Yeah.
When you're ready, we'll give that minute.
Well, Bob?
So I'd go ahead and make a motion to strike everything after to obtain special privileges in section B.
Okay, I have a motion. Second. Second by Will. Okay, do we have any other discussion on that section?
I just
Go
think
ahead.
that's the way to go, because when you get too specific, it doesn't allow for situational, that it doesn't allow for anybody to apply their common sense or their judgment or anything else. So if you get too specific, you tie your hands and make more problems than by, if you leave it this way, just special privileges, then that will have to be decided on a case by case if somebody brings that up. I don't think you can, I think you can get too definitive and ruin things that way.
Okay. Any other discussion? Comment? Okay. So we'll take a vote. All those in favor of striking the last part of that sentence, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. The motion passed.
Unanimous?
You hear any?
I didn't hear any objection.
Consider it done.
Okay, Steve, did you have something that you wanted? Okay. And Chief? Did you?
Well, I was gonna suggest that we don't even have B in there, because I think it creates a lot of confusion. To obtain personal or financial gain or advantage probably covers just about everything that might come along. To obtain a special privilege probably would be covered by bribes, gratuities, and payment. I don't know. It's just a thought.
I'm good with that, too.
All right, anything else on that? Okay.
That comment, I believe, was from a previous, under F there, I believe it was from a previous conversation. So I won't comment on that. At some point previously, 10153A, it was suggested that that's against the law anyway and could just be pulled out of there.
It doesn't hurt to be there.
I was gonna
It seems like there's a fair amount in here that could be potentially against the law. So I just left the flag on it so that it can be discussed by senior staff or with note for another look at this meeting for what folks thought about that. So that takes us to 100154. There's a comment of in D. Let me make sure it still lines up properly. Yeah, so it's all this. There is some concern that possibly change knowing to willful. But then that whole section is reworked based on the rewrite anyway, so I'll just let people look at it for how it is and see what you think about that section there. And then as a throwdown, I added, as I was chewing this whole thing over, that it was always taught to me that policy in the POM is a guideline, not a rule book. As we've had this, the auditor's process and a more robust IA system, the policy manual has become much more of a rule book. And so this was my way of putting a little piece in there that still shows that, yeah, you must adhere to the provisions of this, but if you don't, you're gonna have to justify it, and trying to speak that in a way that gets that message across that, yeah, you can violate it, and you may have a legitimate justified reason to do so, but be prepared to speak to your actions. I'd be interested in people's input on that. I'd love it if we could have a line at the opening statement that says that this is a guideline, not a rule book, and that there are no hard lines in anything, but that you have to be able to justify and be doing things for the right reason, at the right time, with the right intent. So
So I have Bob in the queue.
So, yeah, my experience is it's a guideline until it's not. So, this part here is troubling me a little bit, is C, promptly and fully report when you're cited for, oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. Employees, I'm sorry, it's B, such as it being incited or arrested by this or any other law enforcement agency. So with those two criteria, it doesn't cover an officer involved in an incident in another area that becomes part of an investigation without being cited or arrested, and maybe possibly bring some kind of bad press on the department as a result, because of what they were involved in that particular city or town or county or wherever they were. And yet, if they're never charged, but the incident becomes public, having not reported it to the department, there's no way to hold them accountable for that. But I know if I were involved in a situation in say, Springfield, and an officer questioned me about my conduct, or a person made a complaint to an officer and they questioned me, but he didn't resolve it with an arrest or citation, wouldn't I still be obligated to report that I had been involved in a situation where I was accused of misconduct? And, is that something that you do normally anyway, or is that, if it is, it should probably be covered in here, but if it's something you don't unless they're cited or arrested. If that's the intent, only when they're cited or arrested, then I guess
It
this
just
is
says
correct.
such as.
see, and I read it as promptly and fully report activities that have resulted in official contact.
Yeah, period.
Okay.
For example,
Such as, yes.
Oh,
being
For
arrested or
example,
cited, such as being, so those are given as examples, not as an absolute list.
Right. that's fine then.
Is that, but if that's unclear, right, can certainly clarify that.
I'm just trying to cover the loophole.
Yeah,
That's-
no, absolutely. And the intent is that those are examples of a couple of the things that, the obvious things, to get the intent across, but,
I mean, we had these things happen, a chief in Portland that shot his buddy and never said anything. They never got charged or cited, but never said anything about it. So I mean, with those are the kinds of things.
yeah. Well, we could certainly just change that to, for example, and then it's probably more in line with the rest of the policy for how we give examples of, a couple of examples to just show what we're talking about.
Right.
Okay, Steve?
So a couple questions here on A. Adhere to all misdemeanor or felony statutes. Working this in the affirmative makes that sound weird. I'd probably substitute like comply. Well, that word, yeah, comply with, you know.
Yeah.
So you said must comply with all misdemeanor felonies. Well, how about comply with all laws or any court orders, criminal or civil? Because misdemeanors, I guess you're saying they could commit violations. Those would be acceptable.
Well, they speed to apprehend people.
I would say the bar is
I don't know how
higher.
much you're expected.
Allows that.
I would say that the bar is higher when it comes to our level of, for our code of conduct. The bar is higher. Violations are a very low level of enforcement,
Yeah.
a very low level of incident, and for the level of, yes, people need to follow them, but
But just to, I don't know how you adhere to a misdemeanor or felony statute. It just seems
Wrong word.
yeah.
really weird. I'd just be curious, like your part that you touched on in the beginning about employees who violate any of the listed policy procedures will be required to justify their actions. What does that look like? I mean, 'cause somebody's found like, or alleged to have violated something, there's some sort of investigation and it's gonna be an outcome, but I don't know, what does that process look like? Because they could violate use the felony statute and maybe they can justify it. Would be acceptable.
It would depend on the circumstances. I wish I could remember exactly what it was. There was a circumstance that came up recently.
Traditionally, it's been use of drugs by undercover police officers as part of their cover. And that would be the most common felony I can think of that was justified. I mean, we can all think of speeding or things like that, but that's the one that just jumps to mind. Now, they obviously have very tight rules under the law about when that is permitted or not permitted in various places.
I'm just curious, how does this process come about? It's like somebody reports an officer, or whether it's a community member or another officer, and then, like, how do you get to the point where they justify it? Or they attempt to justify it?
Well, I think it could potentially come about in any number of ways in their discussion with their sergeant at the street level, if it's something minor, to if it's something that happened in the heat of the moment where there wasn't room to have authorization or time to have authorization, that you'd bring it up to your sergeant to have a greater discussion. It could come up if it was discovered in an IA or a complaint or something. I mean, generally speaking, that's the sort of thing that's going to be bigger and it's going to be very easily seen.
I guess I'll use a much simpler, and it was part of our discussion. So if profanity was against this policy, because it talks about this policy as being one of them. So profanity was one that we had here. It says that's against the policy to use profanity. An officer used profanity was then had to justify why he had to use that profanity in that situation. I guess that's what he's leaving open in this by saying that you have to justify it, because maybe that would be acceptable. Maybe they're,
Like a level of force in that case, instead of.
or, somebody punched you and that just came out, or, you know what I mean? There could be, and it's a simple example, I know, but it just, those are the kind of things you're sort of leaving open in here, that there could be an open violation of a policy. Somebody can make that decision thinking, okay, I did that because they still might be found, but they're gonna have to justify.
Not identifying yourself, where it doesn't quite fit into those categories, but you've got some funny reason why weird conflict of interest or some funny circumstance where you really don't want to identify yourself, even though it is in violation of the policy, but you've got some funny justification for not doing so. It's just, it comes up at times.
Go ahead.
I don't know.
I wonder if the word explain would be better.
Instead of
Not every
justify.
violation can be justified.
Yeah.
And it might better read, any of the listed policies/procedures may be required to explain their actions instead of will.
And that, if they explain their actions, if it's not satisfactory to command, there still may be consequences. It doesn't necessarily, oh, I explained my actions, so,
Yeah.
kind of like, well, I said with all due respect, you know. So it's- So there's still might
should be covered.
Anything else on that section? Did we cover that? So I've got it here, being the wrong word, clarifying the such as to a for example, and then may and explain instead of will and justify.
And then, because we will miss this in the final version, it says felony statutes. We're all gonna miss that. That's fine.
Statutes, yes.
So I didn't violate any felony statutes.
They'll get a free pass on that one.
What does a felony statute look like?
And how it's
That's awesome.
Any other thoughts about A for the specifics of what that calls out?
No, you're not allowed to comment anymore,
So then we've got the retaliation section, which Portland again made that pretty easy because it was pretty complete, thorough, easy to read.
Yep.
Any thoughts or comments on that one? All right, and that takes us to, I didn't have any notes down to courtesy. I moved the public to the front. Courteous and considerate toward the public, the supervisors, subordinates, and other employees, and I've got a slew of notes that I'll retain. I imagine that that'll probably be pulled out when the rubber meets the road. But I've got quite a few notes about people's thoughts on it. D, as part of courtesy, that was kind of a short, non-complete sentence that got reworked with the rewrite. So I think that blends a little bit better.
Yep.
And then 10159 now, which was 8, which is the conduct section. We had more discussion about the horseplay. It kind of went back and forth, and so it was left as it was. The only other comment was on the suspected, and now we've decided to change that to potential again, so that'll be another rework there. And nothing for confidentiality of information. And that puts us into conflicts of interest that had a fair amount of discussion before. Went back and forth on whether or not to add perception included with the potential conflict or perception of conflict. So I didn't put anything in because there wasn't consensus. And then allowing making public statements to media purporting personal opinions to be official department statements unless authorized by the chief. It was brought up when that would ever be authorized, and that seemed reasonable, so I removed that section. And then there were some concerns about, or at a previous version, concerns about how you figure out C, but I don't think we've really had much more discussion about it, so I've just sort of left it as is, but with the flag on it so that it's looked at the next level of filtration. But open for discussion. And that puts us to where we started.
Hey, hey.
I've got a question. So if someone is violating, if we have an officer who is violating someone's Fourth Amendment rights, which policy would you go to in this? Or a 14th Amendment?
Oh.
It's a good question.
If it's not there, it seems like we better carve something out, or
Yeah.
it could be that the search and seizure policy covers all the Fourth Amendment questions. It might be that the professional stops covers the 14th Amendment, 8th Amendment.
It'd be interesting to do a review and take a look around. What you said adherence to laws, was that your?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a law. It's the constitutional rights to a law, the highest, as a matter of fact.
Any thoughts or comments on the overall rewrite for the way it reads? It seemed like it turned out better than I thought it was going to after seeing what we came up with. Is that I'm hoping that everybody's in agreement with that.
I think you did a great job.
Yeah.
I can't take
Been
any
very
credit
patient.
for it.
It's affirmative and I think it just flows better.
Okay.
Be more negative.
Perfect. And just because we said we were going to come back to it, now that we've been through the whole thing, any thoughts on that title again, and then
Well, I did have one thought. So you have professional standards as your section above that, which kind of overlays judgment, professional integrity. So are these really work standards? These are your everyday, when you come to work, these are the standards we expect you to live by.
employment standards. No.
Dude, that brings up
I
other
think-
things to me.
Yeah.
Work may not be the right word, but that's what, I mean, because you've
Yeah.
stepped it down for professional standards, so this is another form of standard. What's the standard? It's the everyday work standard. That's what, not sure that's the right word, but it's not, it's really what. So, I don't know if
Yeah.
that helps or if that just muddies the water, but to me, it just that's what we're saying. We're saying you have your professional standards, which are your integrity, your judgment. Now, this is your everyday when you come to work or operate as an officer.
Yeah.
Ooh, there's one operational conduct.
Because they're standards, they're just what kind of standards are they?
Yeah.
And it could be that 1001.5 becomes professional standards. We find a new term for judgment, professionalism, and integrity.
Oh, that's an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would work too.
Look at that, a whole new wrinkle.
I know, right? Hey, wrinkles give me something to work with at least, instead of being at a blank slate.
Okay. Anything else, Sergeant?
No, sir, that's all I got.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
You're doing a great job. We
Oh, thank
appreciate
you.
this is a tough one. And you did a great job working with us and getting it put together.
Well, I appreciate all the input. I genuinely mean that. I really do mean
Or
that.
most of it.
I appreciate all of it. I don't like all of it all the time. No, it's been a good process, and I appreciate being able to actually get into the weeds on these, because a lot of them there's just not much controversial about the policies, and we kind of blow through, and it's when we get into policies like this where the need for this sort of a body becomes very apparent, because the input is invaluable. So I would prefer that we had policies like this every time, because it makes the process more robust and I don't know.
We like it too.
Yeah, that's what you're here for.
So, good. So,
All right, I'm gonna finish a couple of notes and then I'll get out of here.
No, you're fine there. So, so then we come to, we're gonna end a little early tonight. So we'll go around real quickly and do commissioner comments. We'll start with you, Scott, if you don't mind.
I'm gonna pass tonight. Thank you.
Now then we're gonna go reverse orders.
All right, I just appreciate all your work on this. It's a material rework. It looks good. You're doing a really nice job, thanks.
Perfect, thank you.
And my comment would be about the May 6th meeting, where it's got the police chief's presentation, and consider defining and describing the ideal department and ideal engagement with the public. I don't want to lose track of that. I mean, this is a lot of stuff we have to go through, but maybe if this is somewhat finished, we should establish these things before we continue with anything else, I think.
Okay.
I just asked the chief, the protests and counter protests last weekend? Seems long. It's been a long week. In Portland, if there's any lessons learned and stuff you could bring back about how you might deal with that, because I know I've heard concern around the table. Just for your next report, maybe, if there's anything we can take away locally. Thank you.
I'd like to just express my delight and appreciation for the award ceremony. It was really a pleasure to be there.
It was nice.
It made me feel good all over to see those officers get recognition.
And citizens.
Good. I just want to thank everybody tonight. This was a great discussion. The code of conduct is a very important policy. And I'm glad we spent a lot of time working on that. So, good. Thanks, everybody.
So Will reminded me that was a great ceremony, and I was really impressed with the partnerships between the awards that were given for community, and that's what gave me that scenario of the officer who helped the veteran, and Davis Restaurant, and a couple other people that really, a dentist that stepped up and took care of his needs. I just think that it's a shame, that it really is a shame that anything bad gets published in the newspaper right away. That's news nowadays. I mean, that's what we live with. And the good stuff never really gets out there to people, and it's just, I I know it's not for lack of trying. We got some good PR people in this department, and it's nice when things get out there, like that story that did get out there. But I wish somebody had covered some of those things, and it would have been nice. But it does my heart go to see when things good happen in the community. It just makes me feel better living in the community when I see things like that. Thank you.
I heard the comments about communicating with families of missing persons. I don't think every missing person case would require a family liaison, but it's a good
No.
idea, and so it's something we'll talk about. I'll look at the abandon rates. That'll be our new favorite term now. And then the lessons learned from the Portland protests, I'll see what is. I know we got somebody looking at it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. Call the meeting to close.
Congratulations.
Oh,